Hello and welcome to Bolt Action Reloading. If you'd like a quick update on our Savage 110 BA Stealth project, chambered in 338 Lapua Magnum, stick around. Welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time here and you'd like to see how I and the rest of the community here make our group smaller, start now by subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell icon. That way you'll get notified when I post new videos and you won't miss anything. Today's video is all about talking about where we are now with our Savage 110 BA Stealth chambered in 338 Lapua Magnum. If you're unfamiliar with this project on the channel, I'll put a card up so you guys can go check this out from the beginning. Essentially, we got a pretty reasonable deal on this rifle, and we're hoping to get as much out of it as we possibly can. Now, as of the last update, I was only actually 10 rounds in, and I was whining a little bit about the velocity that we have achieved. And so, there's actually an awful lot to talk about. Back in that video, we were discussing our first 10 shots that we'd actually load with Reloader 33. And essentially, the velocity we were expecting from that charge was not the velocity that we were getting. Really, not very close at all. Through some discussion with my subscribers, I actually bought some factory ammunition for this rifle and shot it just to get a baseline for the velocities that we should expect. And honestly, guys, it's probably where I should have started. But what I actually selected, certainly not because I was trying to get the highest quality ammunition I could find, but basically just to get a baseline for the velocity that I could expect. I'll put a shot up so you can see it, but basically this is Herder's Factory 338 Lapua Magnum. The projectile is actually a tried and true 250 grain Sierra Match King. Now, a little bit of discrepancy. In case you're unfamiliar with the Herder's brand, Cabela's has bought it and actually has contracted S&B to load it. Assuming it's actually the same ammunition that S&B is loading for themselves, I would actually expect the same estimated velocity. However, it's really not the case. Both of them actually quote their velocity on a 27-inch barrel, and again, this is only 24. But the Herder's ammo actually specifies a velocity at 2878 feet per second. But if you go to S&B's website for their 250 grain Sierra Match King factory ammunition, they're claiming out of a, technically if you do the conversion, 27.1 inch barrel, 2847 feet per second. Either way you go, I took 5 shots of that factory ammunition just to get a baseline for the velocity, and the baseline velocity we got was 2773 feet per second. So obviously a little bit slower, but not quite as bad as I was afraid of. Dragging behind 75 to 100 feet per second, depending on what number you want to believe. But again, I've lost 3 inches of barrel, probably somewhere in the ballpark of where we belong. At the point I shot this, the rifle certainly wasn't completely broken in, and it very well may speed up at least a little bit. Getting that test out of the way, I felt a little bit more compelled to continue on with my reloading experiment. As with some of the projects on this channel, they just don't head out the way they should. And if you remember back in my reloading video, I told you guys that I was actually going to be testing a combination of 3 different powders, 2 different primers, and some various neck tensions for our first 100 rounds during our fire forming to kind of get a baseline where we should start. Now, my initial plan was to kind of go through each one of those powders, talk about what happened with all those, and show some of the groups. However, some of the problems we ran into along the way made the group information not very useful, at least in my opinion. So, without going into too much painstaking detail, basically, all 100 rounds were shot on 3 separate occasions, and to kind of summarize as easy as I can, the more we shot, the worse the groups got. Our first 10 rounds, we actually just took some velocities, didn't really get any group information. All we were doing was actually kind of getting the scope sighted in, getting some baseline velocities, and running our first 10 rounds to the barrel. And if you remember this chart, this is what I kind of showed. That first round is going to have a slightly higher velocity, and as we went along for the day, those velocities kind of crept back down. But honestly, that seems to be what would happen in most of my rifles. My cold bore shot is usually the fastest, and the rounds after that tend to slow down a little bit. Though this may not be the case for everyone, it seems to be the case that I run into fairly frequently. But again, I don't think that that load of Reloader 33 is really a reasonable load for 225 grain projectiles, and to do it again, I really would not have picked that. That out of the way, I decided to finish up the rounds. Frankly, I already had them loaded, and so we continued on and shot the rest of our Reloader 33 loads, but I couldn't seem to quite break that 1 MOA group size that I was hoping to. During the next outing, I finished off the Reloader 33 and headed on into the H1000 loads. And boy, was there a difference. Without getting into too much information, the H1000 Rotembo certainly bumped the velocity up, running in the 2950 feet per second range. But honestly, I'm probably going to get to that summary in a different video. But needless to say, what we really need to get after is that the more we shot, the bigger our groups got. And honestly, I'll put a chart up. Yes, guys, this is just charting the group size in MOA as we shot along. Full disclosure, the last shot of our second day of shooting was actually, I had started my first Rotembo loads, And as we were finishing that off, I actually realized that the scope had become loose. Not just the scope, honestly, but the entire Picatinny rail. Yes, guys, that large rail is only held on by 2 screws, and I had not retorqued them, as I was hoping the factory had done it correctly, but I guess what I get for thinking. I'm very certain that a significant portion of the groups opening up was because, obviously, my sight was all over the place. And honestly, I didn't know it till I was packing up my rifle for the day. So, certainly we showed up for our last outing. We were going to finish off the last 25 rounds all loaded in Retembo for this rifle. I don't know if that first group was me. Maybe it was just luck on the second group. But basically, to make a long story short, we started off at 2.7 MOA, which wasn't a great improvement from where we left off. Dropped to one that was finally under 2 MOA, but finished off the day above 4. I was very disappointed at this point, and as I was packing the rifle, I honestly noticed, on this particular occasion, I found that the screws that hold the chassis to the action actually had come loose as well. So, full disclosure, I'm pretty sure that most of my groups opening up had to do with my barrel being loose from my action and not being held steady during shooting. And who knows, maybe I should honestly be happy it wasn't bigger than 4 MOA. As ridiculous as it sounds, guys, that is my first 100 rounds. I'm sure several of you have already noticed that, guess what? The stock has been changed. I didn't mention it in my last video. I was certainly getting tired of the original stock, and I'll put a shot of that up on the screen so you guys can see it. Essentially, the adjustable cheek cone on this is just a cheap piece of plastic. It moves all over the place. If you put any weight on your face at all, it kind of moves all over the place. So honestly, if I build another AR, maybe I'll put it on that. But at this point in time, this stock has no place on this rifle, at least for what I want to do with it, and it just had to go. A couple of you guys had recommended a different stock. Had I not actually already had the Magpul PRS stock, I may have chose a different option. And who knows, eventually maybe I will pick a different stock, but this is a pretty good stock. I've got it, it's on the rifle, and this is what I plan to move forward with at the moment. A couple calls to Savage later, and in case you don't feel like spending any time on hold on their tech support line, I'll tell you what they told me. So guys, the bolts from the Picatinny rail into the action are actually supposed to be torqued, according to my phone call to Savage, to 15 inch-pounds, and the bolts from the chassis into the action are actually supposed to be torqued to 40 inch-pounds, per my conversation with Savage. I couldn't find this in writing anywhere, and that's why I spent way longer than I honestly planned to, waiting to get this information from them. But sometimes those lessons that are learned hardest stay with us the longest, so hopefully we won't have any more issue with this moving forward. As I mentioned in some of the other videos, I honestly had left all of the settings pretty much stock from the factory, meaning pretty much I really hadn't adjusted any of the trigger pull weight. But since I had to retorque the screws going to the action, I took the action out of the chassis, I readjusted my factory trigger to a much lower setting, and I do feel in the long run that I'm probably going to be able to get a little bit better control over it as well. So I'm very excited to get this rifle back out. I'm fairly confident moving forward that I'm going to be able to break that 1 MOA mark that so far has eluded me with this rifle. One other thing that may be changing in the near future, but I won't say for sure, I'm pretty much almost at my limit for my scope of actually being able to get proper eye relief. The stock that I put on here is a little bit longer. Basically, I'm having to have my scope as far back as I possibly can to actually get the eye relief that I need. So I don't know if a new bracket or if I'm going to be able to live with the way it is. Until I get to the range the next time, I really won't know. So it's not really where I wanted to be, but 100 rounds into this rifle, I certainly think I've learned a couple of things. I'm going to cover all the standard deviation and velocity information in another video, try and keep that separate. But at this point, I'm certainly not going to steer anyone away from the rifle. Even though my initial first impression of the rifle has been a little rough, I do think had these screws been torqued properly out of the gate, had I noticed it a little bit sooner, I don't think my aggravation would have been near as much as it had been had I known some things would go wrong. So if you're brand new to this rifle or you're thinking about picking it up, go get yourself a set of these extended Torx bits so you can actually get to the Picatinny rail and torque those appropriately. And also you're going to need, if you want to set it to the proper torque, you're going to need an Allen bit of some type similar to that to be able to get through there and be able to torque those appropriately. But don't do what I did. Start off doing that. So guys, like I said, basically we've tested a few powders to this point, which we'll cover in another video. We have shot that factory ammunition here, confirmed that we're getting a reasonable velocity, so I don't think anything is actually quote-unquote wrong with the rifle. With the 24-inch barrel, we should expect lower velocities than they're quoting with the 27-inch barrel. I am getting a little bit more used to the scope, and I'm hoping, for the time being, I am going to be sticking with this SWFA fixed 20 power scope. And hopefully having some of the bugs worked out of the rifle, I'll have a much better platform to feel comfortable that it can get me on target the way I need it to. Like I said, guys, if you're picking up this rifle, you might as well fit right into your budget that you're going to replace in this stock, because I don't want to bash on anybody that actually likes this stock. However, I just don't think this is the right application, but I know it isn't the right stock for me. Obviously, the groups are disappointed. I very much was hoping we'd have several sub-MOA groups at this point, though mostly I'm blaming the rifle loosening up. I do think there's potential here, and I'm very excited to get this rifle back out on the range with some new reloads and start some load development now that I have fire-formed brass. And I'll start off with new confidence that we're going to start heading in the right direction for some small groups. Essentially, that's our 100-round update. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. Have you guys had a similar experience? Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. I'm sure I should have checked these things out far before 100 rounds were through this rifle. But all is not lost. I did get some good information from the reloads, which, like I mentioned, I'll be sharing in a different video. But obviously, I'd love to be in a different place, but I just can't change the past, and we can only keep moving forward. If you guys have any specific advice about this beast, I'd love to hear that. So guys, that's basically where we are after 100 rounds, technically 105. I hope you guys got some useful information out of this. If not, maybe you guys at least got a good laugh at my expense. But anyway, I hope you guys stick around for the next video in this series. We'll talk about how our reloads performed and where we're going to go moving forward. So I really hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you have any comments or questions on the video, please put those in the comment section below. If you're not subscribed to the channel and you like the content, please consider subscribing to the channel, hit the like button, and like always guys, until next week, stay safe in small groups.